Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Working Dragon Mystic Roundtable. I know it's been a while. Tonight we have a really good topic, one that is, well, it's been really close to my heart for a long time, and I think a lot of people do need to put some consideration in this. Of course, returning, we have Jade down here in the lower corner, and we got two new faces here at the roundtable joining us for this particular conversation. One of them, you all may know if you're in the Gilded server, that is our own Bornoldus. He's been with us almost since the beginning of our old Discord server, really. So this will be his first time joining us here on the roundtable. And one of our new moderators over at Gilded, we have Oscar joining us as well. So not only is a new moderator, he is also biting the bullet and jumping out here on the channel with us. So, all right, everyone, tonight's topic, we are going to talk about listening actively and listening to actually understand, not to just respond, and what those differences actually are and what that means to each of us. Because everyone's going to have a different perspective. So, now for me, or Jake, do you want to start this one?
Gosh dang it. I was saying in my head, don't pick me first.
I had to. Something about your face. It's like, don't pick me. Don't pick me. I almost picked Oscar. I almost picked Oscar. But...
listening for understanding is definitely one that is a concept that people don't hold as a good standard nowadays. Almost feels like people are listening to try to find an argument, to try to win an argument. Actually, more often than not, I've had many conversations that turned into just a general conversation of throwing different ideas back and forth, where people start cherry picking bullet points that they think they heard in a conversation and twist it to push their own perspectives. I feel like it doesn't make for a very constructive conversation, nor does it allow for all members of the conversation to hear other people's perspectives. Because honestly, I love the idea of going into a conversation being proven wrong, having a different idea thrown at me and having somebody change my mind.
That's actually something I've said a lot. I actually enjoy being wrong and being proven wrong. Because for me, that's not a negative. That's an opportunity to learn something, to grow as a person.
Yeah. It absolutely can be, whether you're playing devil's advocate in the situation or genuinely trying to convey a point. You know, if you can't be willing to really understand both points of view and be like, actually, no, hold on, I might be mistaken in this, or, you know, these details aren't lining up. You know, if it kind of defeats any point of like self-mastery on the channel, it defeats any point of any of that if you can't listen to a counterpoint, whether it's right or wrong.
That's true.
In your personal point of view.
Oscar, your thoughts?
Yeah, that was interesting that you mentioned self-mastery, because I talked to Odin and Zephyr today about it, and they're both like, oh yeah, it's pretty simple, just like self-mastery, don't put your ego into it. And it was like so curt and to the point, and I was just like, oh yeah, it's kind of like that. Like if you need to really engage information or like exchange with a person, or physical or not, it helps to have like an open mind and a willingness, a receptiveness, and adaptability.
Yeah,
to,
adaptability.
Yeah, to you know, something, another person or entity or whatever being different and thinking differently to you.
Right. And especially when it comes to the occult, this is something we need to learn, because everyone wants to talk about bridging the gaps between different occult practices, reaching a point where you can have these discussions among colleagues. And we also hear that, but I want to have the discussion without people being hurtful or offensive and insert all the lines of criteria. Now, I'm not saying that the conversation can't be hurtful and offensive, but there's two caveats to this. First off, you have to be open and willing to have an open conversation, which the person's going to say something you might not agree with, and that's just that. But you also have to be willing to have that conversation, genuinely listen, actively listen, and listen without, I guess, to retaliate or just to prove your point of view. It's about sharing
Right.
views, not really proving that point of view, if that makes sense.
It does. And I've often seen two types of situations typically when it comes to this type of a problem coming up. Is like Jade had mentioned, they're either just waiting and listening for you to stop talking, just for them to get their point in, and they're not even listening to what you're actually saying. Or this possible second, that they aren't, how to put it, they're not fully trying to understand what you're saying or what you're trying to mean by doing so. And they're taking what they're hearing out of context and applying something else. Because I've had discussions with some folks where they've taken, let's say on magical practice differences, I do my thing this way, they do theirs this other way. And they have come across, they took the difference of opinion as me trying to attack them, as opposed to just inferring that's just not how I do it. I just do it this way.
Right. It's like they think you're telling them they're doing it wrong,
right?
When you just use a different method.
Exactly.
Right. And that's, oh my God, the number of times I've encountered that. I still get hate mail over some of those conversations. Because it's like I said, we're all essentially going the same direction to self-mastery, ascent, whatever you want to call it. But it's an entire roadmap. There's thousands and hundreds, millions of different roads, and you don't have to go a straight line. No one ever really goes a straight line. So no one's ever going to take the same path. But we're all going the same place. There's plenty of ways to do it. And I know what you're talking about. There's a lot of people out there who argue that gotcha. And to that, I would also say when you're having these discussions, it's also a wise thing, though perfectly understandable when you're stupid and you don't do it, to perhaps ask for clarification to make sure you're on the same page.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not enough people ask for clarification.
Have an example of that ourselves. We do.
We do. Me and Bourne here. Him and I go back and forth on a lot. Him and I share a lot of hobbies. And we were having a debate on blade classifications. I'm going to try and keep this as vague as I can for YouTube. I don't want to be like, oh. And we were arguing over one specific classification. We were going back and forth. I mean, it was getting heated. And we were both making our points over and over. And it got to the point, I think both of us felt like we were just repeating ourselves and the other one wasn't listening. We were just in this spiral of explanative stupidity. That's the best way to put it. However, when it was over, we walked away. I think it was later that night.
It was either later that night or the next morning, one of the two.
Yeah,
I want to say.
I finally realized at no point in that conversation did either one of us state where our categories were coming from. Now, when we're talking about blades,
we were, and I didn't actually.
There's two major classifications. There's the developmental, the place in war, and what they were called originally, and then there's the new modern museum style classification where a lot of the terms have changed.
Yeah, and a lot of those terms changed only within the last 20 years or so, 30 years maybe.
And I'm old.
And so I was using the more modern museum definitions, whereas he was using their old wartime classification.
Right. Old geezer, young buck. Miscommunication.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just
But had either of us hit the pause button and be like, wait a minute, what classification are we using?
I was gonna say, because I went and looked up, like the moment that we broke off, I'm like, fine, I'm gonna go find proof. That's not right. Hold on, what?
Old geezer's
shit.
right, dang it.
Oh, well,
We were both right and we were both wrong.
yeah.
It can happen, people. It can absolutely happen.
Yeah.
Goes
Good
for
time.
relationships too. Listen,
Absolutely.
ask questions. I am
Mhm.
people, I'm coming up on my 23rd wedding anniversary this year. Somehow, some way, we've never really had a fight. We've never had a massive blow up. I've never slept in the doghouse. I've never been put on the couch. I've threatened to sleep on the couch, in which case she's always threatened. She's like, I'll just follow you. It's like, but if y'all saw where I grew up, that's mythical. No one would believe it. And I owe it all to communication and listening, and actually willing to stop to listen and realize you're not listening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's something else I should point out. No one's perfect. Okay, when we're saying these things, when we're saying work on these things and practice them, we're not perfect.
Mhm.
Like there's plenty of times I'm doing something, I'm reading, I'm working, I'm editing a video, maybe I'm playing a video game, maybe I'm watching a series. My wife starts talking to me, she's going on, I am responding because parts of it are sinking in enough that I'm answering. But then she asked me, so what do you think about this particular thing? And I realized there's holes in the communication I'm receiving. And I no longer know how to answer this one. And
Yeah.
I feel bad because I basically have to turn and say, sweetie,
Like, can you
I
repeat
missed
that?
a lot of that. Could you repeat it? Now, is that frustrating? Very much so. But she also understands that I am being open and honest about the fact that I missed it. I want to understand it. I want to hear you. And that makes all the difference. So
Absolutely.
if you don't hear it, be willing to admit it. Suck it up and admit
Yep.
it. If you're not
Yep.
heard and your partner, friend, colleague, in Lauren's case, admits it that they didn't hear you, don't take it out on them.
Mhm.
That's honest communication. That's healthy. That's good. People make mistakes. Move on.
I mean, I have this tendency of like kind of over explaining my intention sometimes.
I think I do that too.
I do a little bit too much information gotcha. Because
Yeah.
like when someone
Yeah.
asks me a question, I'm just like, okay, I don't know if you know enough about this, so I'm just going to give you the whole textbook.
I do the same thing.
And then once you understand all of that, answer C.
I've also seen you born, like you give the whole book and then you start going into off-topic rabbit trails because we'll be in the admin area like, where's he going with this? I don't know.
Some things matter.
And we thought we were
With
going to
it.
Florida, but we end up in Canada.
If you go north far enough, eventually you end up coming up from the south. So it's a method. It's just not the best way.
Wow.
Just all the
But
way
yeah, people
around.
just watch
Yeah.
Coffee Hour. I don't shut up. I try to cut myself off. I try to make sure I explain it clearly. And you'll watch, I punctuate it with, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
No,
Oh
all
yeah.
the
You
time.
you throw that out there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Because in my brain, there's still more to say.
Yeah, and part of that is kind of knowing like the context and the audience. So like I've done that to my girlfriend before. I'm like try and explain like relativity. So I'm like, okay, so we're gonna need, and then already I'm like, okay, well, this is not gonna help at all. 30 minutes in,
You don't
so
have Southern analogies like I do to pull from. That's
Yes.
my superpower. If y'all have watched my teaching style, I use redneck analogies and I just channel them into making complex things make sense.
So I've done a similar thing, but it's always disappointing when you come up with an analogy and it's like, yes, this fits it perfectly. It's like, I don't know what that is. Oh, okay. Never mind. Let's try this approach. I'm like, that was perfect. You don't know what a double-decker bus is? Okay.
And
So-
you have to explain your analogy.
Yeah, then you have to
Yeah.
explain, yeah, and back into
Then
one
it
of
just
those
it doesn't
endless
it
loops.
falls apart.
One interesting thing Katrina actually threw at me to include in this particular episode when I told her we was going to do it. She's like, if you're wanting to know if you're actively listening, if you're listening to understand, while you're listening, listen to be able to rephrase what was just told to you.
That's
And
great.
restate it in your own words, not verbatim, not to quote it, but to
Mhm.
restate it in your own words. Because for you to restate it in your own words, you actually do need to understand the information that was just given to you.
Yeah.
And if you're able, if you are having an actual discussion that you're worried like it might get heated or an argument with a friend, a spouse, or something, she actually used to do this with her husband before he passed. The rule was when I say my piece, you have to restate it to me in your own words, because that way they knew they're both on the same page. And if something was off center, they could be like, well, this one thing here, and get it centered.
Mhm. Funny thing is, I actually do that with my kids when I'm
That's a
talking to
great
them.
thing. I wish I'd been taught that when I was a kid.
I do that all the time because I'm trying to make sure, like, I got young kids, one's 8 years old and one's 3 years old. My 3-year-old, she gets a pass right now because she's still a little young. But my 8-year-old,
Mhm.
when I'm talking to him, I tell him of what I need him to do and whatnot. And I'm like, all right, so what did I just say? When I first started throwing that at him, he looked at me like a deer in headlights.
Yeah.
He got into that habit of, if I just told her I heard it, the discussion's over, I can go back to playing.
And so now,
Yep. Because
now he
that's what I would
knows.
that's what I would have done when I was younger, is I just like tune out, and I got conditioned well enough to where I could, yep, no, I understand. That's reasonable. I understand. It's like whenever I get in trouble for something, just like zone out. I would just go somewhere else.
So now he knows that when I'm talking to him, like directly to him, that he better pay attention, because I'm going to ask him pop quiz questions like, what did I just say?
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I mean, it works. And actually, one thing that almost forgot this one, which I feel bad about. My wife actually brought up. Many of you know my wife's military. They had one of their suicide prevention meeting things, which is a very important thing. And one of the topics they covered fit perfectly with this right here. And she asked me to make sure to include it because it is very important. And that is, sometimes you don't need to actually fix it. You don't need to actually have an answer. You just need to be there to listen and genuinely listen and not rush them. And you'd be surprised how much just listening can help.
Absolutely.
I think I've told most of the older admin, I don't know the two newer ones, that oftentimes if you just sit back and listen, you'd be surprised what you can learn about a problem before you ever speak up.
Yeah. Actually, while I was stewing over this topic today at work, it reminded me of the old roundtables we did on the Havamah, because Odin consistently talks about listening, that a wise man listens. And it goes back to that same thing, because you learn things from people. You learn, you gain more knowledge and wisdom by just shutting up and listening to what's being told you.
You know what? You are correct. And that actually makes me think of one question I have been getting for the last 2 years since starting the channel in email. And it's phrased differently, but it always boils down to this. Why do I waste my time speaking to non-magical practitioners, people of religious beliefs, people of cultural beliefs that are different from mine, people who don't believe in the work I do, these sorts of things? Why do I waste my time talking to them? Why would I waste my time talking to a pastor or someone in a church? And many of you've heard, I do this often.
Yeah.
And
it is not an infrequent occurrence.
It is. And you also will notice, what is it, 99% of the time, there's no negative side effects of these conversations.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's because I am open to hearing their perspective. I'm not going to attack their perspective. They're going to tell me their perspective. I'm going to respectfully give my perspective. And we're going to start a discourse of sharing wisdoms and idioms and information.
Mhm.
Some things aren't going to be of use to me. Other things going to be solid information that I might be able to apply in my life. Or, as is more often the case, I will have a nugget of wisdom or information for someone else when they need it. Perhaps that wisdom didn't serve me, but by having it, I can give that to someone else now. And that truly does begin to bridge those communication gaps.
Mhm.
So there's that too.
Absolutely.
So
I think it's also,
go ahead.
I think it's just like a myopic view. I feel like you can't find somebody or a select group of people who cover like every single interest or possible situation that they could relate to. Like I have different friends who have different interests.
Right. I mean, I know you have interest. I'm not going to bring them up, but you and I discussed certain of your interest, and you and I exploring those interests at some time, perhaps if we ever did an admin get together. You know, it's not a topic I'm familiar with. It's not a topic I've gone deep into outside certain things, but you know, it's not you. I'm sure you have friends that are more versed in it than I am by far. Which weirdly, it's a topic we found out Jade knows about. So
The more this goes on without of context, the more I get worried.
it's nothing bad. So, you know, you do have to be willing to talk to people about things. Like, I used to talk to my dad all the time about music. I've said it before. I am not musically talented. I can't play any instrument except the radio. And I sing worse than a dying cat in heat. So, my dad, as far as a musician, looking at his boy, was like, well, he's going to be good as son. But we used to discuss music all the time. And I'll be honest, there's times when I felt really out of my depth talking music with him and his friends and his band because I didn't feel I had a lot to offer. But looking back, I do realize I kept up with the conversation because I do love music. I listen to music a lot. And my dad's one of the people who cultivated that love of music. I can't play it, I can't sing it, but I have a love of music and how impactful it is on the person. And sometimes we have more in common than we initially realized. So that's also worth considering. I mean, Oscar probably feels like a fish out of water when the three of us are in a call. It starts as business, and the next thing you know, we're talking D&D because, well, business is over. Let's nerd.
Yeah.
Or you reference like the 19th character from your past when you were like 10 years old and has come back for some reason. And you're like, oh, it's Billy Bob from 5th grade. And
Oh,
I'm
why
like,
don't
what?
you want to hear about my deep, dark backstory?
So, I mean, and I will say, and I want your all's perspective on what this means. When I say actively participate in the conversation and actively listen, what does that mean to you, both as one communicating and one doing the listening? Get both sides of that. And we'll start with Oscar.
I think it's kind of like a practice in empathy and awareness and focus. So like usually when I'm trying to explain something to somebody, especially if it's like a time constraint, I have a couple sentences. I have to be aware of like what is it that I'm trying to say to them? Like And then also, who are they, like, and so I can make it remember, because you can say something to somebody and then like it hits their face and it just evaporates into nothing.
Mhm.
And and that's also a little fault on their part, but we can get to that extent. But I think that's kind of like the job of your part, is like, I want you to understand what I'm trying to say, so I'm going to put in the effort of that. And so then as the listener, you then have I want to actively understand what you're saying. So I'm going to then focus and try my best to digest what it is that you're saying.
Right. Right. Oscar, you specifically, I want to ask this too, because you and I have a habit of talking off the board from a lot of people, because we both have a love of science and things that, you know. Now, I've mentioned to you, because you know I have a love of science, and you start throwing things at me, and I've admitted I'm rusty. Some of you need to jog my memory on certain terms. But outside of mine and your conversations, how do you handle if you present the topic, you explain the topic, and someone, just because you're using terminology or you're talking about something that's completely out of their wheelhouse, be it string theory or what, how do you bring it down? Or would you prefer them to just be like, I can't deal with this, or ask you to explain the terminologies? How would you want the person you're talking to help them understand?
It's
Oh,
this
dear God,
textbook.
I only use terminology with people who've studied it. Like,
Okay.
I would only use like I remember when I was in college picking up a paper that one of my advisors had done, and it was just like, I have no idea what this sentence means. And each one was like a particular thing describing this mathematical object. And so if I'm trying to do that to say like my girlfriend's an artist, she's terrible at math, and she's also dyslexic. So it's not, I can't even go into bothering trying to like explain math. So I have to think of like a visual. So in my head, I'm trying to imagine, I'm like, what does it look like? And it's usually easy with physics, because usually you're trying to describe stuff that exists, right?
Right.
And then it gets way harder if you're starting to talk like creativity or like aesthetic or intuition or something like that.
Yeah,
But
the more abstract stuff is always hard to
exactly. Yes, the ineffable stuff is hard to explain. But I was like trying to perfect example. The other night I was trying to explain to her how a fridge worked. Like, basically it was just like, you have a like a playpen full of balls, and you have red and blue balls, and the fridge is trying to separate the red balls from the blue balls. And that's how a fridge works. And that's it. And I was just like, oh, and I was just trying to extremely simplify thermodynamics to my girlfriend, you know. And so that's kind of what I try to do, is like, I don't try to think of terms. I just try to explain like what is that, like, what's temperature explaining actually? What does it mean intuitively?
Yeah.
And then they go from there.
Yeah, and if you run into an individual like myself or Oscar or even Pornoldus up here, if we say something and it doesn't come across clearly, ask questions. Ask questions.
Please.
Which, actually,
ask.
speaking of Pornoldus, I want to get to you, because you have a communication problem that it's been a amusing factor of the admin since we met you.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Did his nose just grow? I think it did. I think it just grew. So, Born, when we talk about actively listening, both as the communicator and as the person being spoken to, how do you view it?
Okay. Well, in the most ideal of scenarios, as the person who is doing the speaking, granted, the more familiar you are with the person that you're speaking to, the better.
Know your audience.
But you have to, similar to what Oscar had mentioned, you have to keep in mind the entire time what you're actually trying to say, and try to work it into a way they best understand. Full agreement there. On top of that, still from the speaker's perspective, it's also best to keep in mind the specific individual and how they are likely to take things. You know, how not only how am I going to best convey the understanding, but also my intent in saying such. And the same comes vice versa. It's this is the exact same thing mirrored on the listener's side. So they're trying to not only understand what you're trying to say, but it's like, okay, what are they trying to do? Are they trying to insult me? No. Are they trying to tell me I'm an idiot? No. Are they trying to help? Maybe. Or are they just giving me information and it just has a suggestion? Maybe. Okay. And actually like be truly thinking about what are they actually trying to do? Which is, like I said, the better you all know each other, the more likely you're just to snap to, oh, they're just trying to help. You know, because similar to the situation I gave earlier, where people will jump to a conclusion, even if they understand exactly what you're saying, they'll just assume why, and they don't actually think it through, and then they react in whatever way. So constantly being mindful of the different viewpoints of the situation. Not only how am I taking it, how am I understanding it, but what do I think is going on from this perspective in the same exact way.
Yeah. No, I agree. You should know your audience and you should consider how you're presenting it. And you should stop and occasionally consider how it's going to be received. And honestly, that's kind of where, and I'm going to call it perceived communication issues come with Bornoldus. And it is perceived. No, it's perceived. Because the thing is, Bornoldus has this thing about speaking very, very properly. And as a friend, I torment him constantly. Like if I send him a text, I jack it up as bad as I can, punctuation, spelling, grammar. It goes beyond redneck what I do to him. And I'm pretty sure I gave him a tick one day. But
there are days.
So,
trust me, there are days.
But the reason that's important is because when he types, he does try to do everything very pointedly proper. And as he said, he tries to cover the information on a broad spectrum to give you the book. He wants to make sure he's trying to cover the information from so many angles perfectly. Weirdly, not a lot of people are used to proper speaking in a text format. And they tend to think that if you're speaking properly in a text format, you are speaking down to them, and people get their panties in a wad. And they take practically everything he says wrong.
Yeah, they think I'm trying to be just looking down at everyone like, how dare you be in my presence? Just that's not what I'm doing. I'm just trying to give you info.
No.
Like if you're asking me, hey, why did my engine break down? I'm going to explain how the engine works and the 2 or 3 things that could cause your problem.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because my audience of Working Dragon Mystic, they gravitate toward me because I am. Some people's referred to me as the common man's magician. I explain everything in simple terms, or redneck analogies, as I call them. So I think it surprises people to find out that I have friends who are quite proper. And then there's my redneck ass over here.
I do try my best.
Right. But you are a perfect example of when someone gives you the information, try not to make an assumption about what's coming over. Just because you type properly, which honestly, there should be no negative stigma to you using proper grammar.
I wish people would do it more. For those watching, please.
But
for me,
step back. And honestly, if we think about it, it's an emotional response. Let's be honest.
It always is. Always.
It's emotion. Yeah. It's emotion. Step back from the emotions.
Exactly.
More often than not, if you want to actively listen and listen for understanding, take what you're hearing and step away from your emotional reaction.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying, like, always be trying to assess why a person is saying this to me, because often, logically speaking, you're going to get a lot better information than if you just react emotionally.
Right. I mean, even in our gilded server, we've had people who ask a question. One person will answer it. 5 other people jump on with a perspective to it because it is a teaching server.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And there's been times when new people in get tension raised because they're like, well, I feel, it's like you asked a question in a teaching server. People are eager to share knowledge in the server. If you ask a question, you should expect multiple viewpoints because that's what we're about here. And
Right. Because it's not just the admin
90%
team.
of the time, once that's explained, they're like, they look back at the same and like, oh, I was out of line. That's my bad.
Yeah, because it's not just the admin team that teaches here. I mean, everyone that has information.
Oh yeah,
There's information.
The admin team try to corral them, but ultimately, everyone is here to share and to learn in the Gilded server, and that's one of the things I freaking love about it. So be mindful of that and be mindful of your emotions when you're trying to genuinely active listen. Because I don't know if it's social media or what, we have literally gotten to the habit. We listen to argue and to, I don't know,
honestly,
if
it's to
retaliate on their point. It's almost like, you can't have two equally value points. One point must lose.
Yeah, so many are stuck.
Conversations go anymore.
So many are stuck on the win-lose condition of I have put you down to the point where it's either like one of us doesn't walk away from the argument.
Yeah.
It almost gets to the point where it's like if it goes anywhere beyond I walk away with a smile on my face because I won, nothing's happened.
Yeah.
Which is the worst way to consider. Change your win condition to have I understood and have they understood. Because if both people fully understand, it doesn't matter if you end up agreeing. The point is to make sure people get it.
I would say I don't even register it as a win condition. My goal for a conversation is to walk away with an understanding of the person I was talking with, because that's my goal. I'm seeking to understand them and where they're coming from. That's object one. Object two is to try and walk away with a nugget of wisdom or understanding I did not have before. In my experience, if that is your goal in any conversation, you're going to walk away better for it and very likely avoid a lot of the drama.
Yeah.
It's very positive, yeah.
Fair enough.
And try not to look at it as a win. I know we get in some debates and stuff in life where we totally want to dunk on a person.
Those do come up, yes.
Those do come up. So, there are situations where people will not allow us to do this fully, but I would still argue we need to do this because there is no better dunk than the fact that if you walk in with an argument in that mindset, you remove the ability for them to slam you or dunk you because you can walk away better regardless of how it goes.
Yeah.
And in my experience, it also keeps you calmer, which tends to calm them down. And you may be able to bring some understanding to them as well. Maybe. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Now, Jade, Mom. By the way, happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
Past, but Jade is our local witchy mom with kids. She has patience beyond that of a saint, if you ask me. Just the other night, I literally, while on a Zoom call, literally saw her kid. Mom, 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 mom. I developed a twitch before she did. Okay?
Same
when it comes to communication, when it comes to patience, when it comes to a busy freaking life, Jade is the expert. Jade, I want to know your view on actively listening and being listened to, because you are in a lot of different swimming pools in your life. You have a husband, you have two very hyper kids, you deal with school teachers, you deal with realtors, you deal with family, I mean, you're just all over the map in the stuff that you have to deal with on a daily basis, and somehow you pretend to maintain your sanity and smile.
And also dealing with the server and all this stuff on top of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then you actually want to help with Working Dragon Mystic and work with the server.
And any of
He
your
actually
own
wants to
magical
do
stuff
that,
you do
people.
outside.
I don't have a contract on her or nothing. She
I
actually
actually volunteered myself as tribute back when Discord was.
Yeah,
right.
because it's all of that normal at home life stuff. There's the server, and then there's any magical work or training or development you do over there too.
Right.
So it's like and
unlike me, she actually finds time to sleep too.
Yeah, amazing.
I'm convinced there's a
So-
shovel involved. Just all right, time for bed.
So I'm just gonna start my little feedback on more of a combined level,
Okay.
because I have
Approach it how
such
you
a
want. We're listening actively.
since I have such a
Mhm.
chaotic lifestyle, and I spend majority of my time either in front of a computer for work or having children blab in my ear all day. So when I actually do have a conversation with somebody, whether I'm listening or being the speaker, I make sure that when I walk away from that conversation, I feel satisfied that I had a great conversation, because my time is limited on when I can have these conversations. And so I want to make the best of it. And that's how I approach all my conversations.
I like that. I'll do.
So as a speaker, I kind of take the same approach as Oscar and Bornaldus, which is when I'm talking to somebody, and if they don't happen to understand what I'm saying, I will do like what they said. I'll find a way to explain it, whatever conversation that we're having, to a point where they can understand, and always willing to adjust what we're talking about or how we're talking about things to make sure it's a constructive conversation. And so, because when you're speaking, you're kind of running the conversation. So you want to make sure that, when you're talking, it's at it's on a level that you want to keep it at. I don't want to walk into a conversation, automatically argue with somebody. I'm walking into a conversation, bouncing off ideas off of people. I just want to hang out just to goof off, and we're talking about random things just to have a good laugh. And so that's how I kind of handle my speaking version of conversations. Now, a lot of times when we're in Zoom chats or whatnot, I tend to be the listener most of the time. And Drake can attest to that. I tend to sit back and just listen to what's being said, but I will chime in quite often. But one thing that I am never afraid of is asking questions. I don't have any shame of admitting that I don't know what is being said.
That is.
And I think that's what really helps the conversations that I do have with people is, even if I don't understand a conversation, I'm like, well, can you explain that a little differently? Because that didn't make any sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I try to make sure I do is, if I happen to not agree with the conversation, I just don't instantly shut myself off from the conversation without hearing the full conversation being had. Because maybe the first half of the conversation, you don't agree with some of the ideals or the things being said, but if you just sit and wait and listen to the end of the story, you'll come to find out, oh, that actually kind of makes some sense. And I feel like that, in a lot of ways, is lost in today's version of conversations, is that the moment somebody doesn't agree with what you're hearing, they instantly just shut themselves off and walk away from that conversation.
Yeah, even if it's like a small snippet.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah. They disagree with a small snippet, and perhaps they're even taking it out of context, and they just get upset, close down, walk away, and all the context and everything that ties it all together came later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know where you're going with that one. That's good advice and a good practice.
Seen quite a bit of that myself.
Mm-hmm.
So. Now, I actually find it interesting how similar your three's way of handling conversations is. And then there's mine, which you all have probably seen this a little bit. And this, I am convinced, comes from me being an old investigator and a gambler. Because when I answer a question, I look at the question that's asked, I think about the question that's been asked, and when I respond, I try to answer the question, but I also try to lead that question into further questions to clarify the subject that then gives me the ability to answer those specific questions. So anyone in Gilded could watch this pattern, like Born, wall of text, Jade, wall of text, Oscar, usually slightly shorter, but usually more than one posting too, gets his point across. Then me, it's like small, wait, small, wait, small. And I'm just going down the flow chart, trying to answer the question while somehow trying to trigger and stimulate them to take the conversation further and give me clarification so that I can better offer more answers if needed. Sometimes that works pretty well. Others, I don't know if I end up confusing them worse or not. Text is not my best medium.
Yeah, because there's some threads where it's like I'll pop in and follow it. I'm like, okay, you had me up until about here. I don't know what all of this is. It goes on for quite a while. So
Yeah.
It's supposed to depend on the quality of the question too. It's like it's the balance of the two.
and it can be. It can be.
Won't
it
lie,
really
I've loved having a YouTube channel to link videos to for common questions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, how do you do this? Paste, go.
I mean, well, actually, I'm pretty sure with intros and whatnot, you guys have probably caught on to a pattern. But if I start getting a question over and over and over and over, I'm going to make a video.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
Not because the question's stupid, not because I'm actually tired of hearing it, but because there are so many people who have this one question. Clearly, there's a need for a place to quickly access this information.
Yeah.
Because I'm with Jade. There's no stupid question. I will ask a question, and you all have laughed at me many a times because you all are talking about this technology and this, smartphone stuff, and I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And you're using shorthand and abbreviations, and I don't know how many times I've had to squirrel. What the hell does that mean? I don't speak whatever that is. And then she has to explain to me whatever sometimes it's images, sometimes it's I don't even know where she's learning this. But she has to translate what she just told me because I don't know. Occasionally, Bourne's able to translate it. There's been a time or two even Bourne's like, I don't know that one.
See, I work with some technology. I use, a couple of devices every day. There's some stuff I just don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's things we don't know. And you shouldn't feel stupid about it. Like, Bourne, I thought you used a paper matchbook the other day. Now, growing up where
I'm not going to live this down. I'm not living it down.
No, you're not. Now, growing up where I did, I knew how to use that matchbook by the time I was 3 or 4. There's people out there screaming,
Get ready to demo.
They didn't let me have it. I just got a hold of them.
Yeah, let's go ahead and demo. Yeah.
But well, I wasn't going to give the details. But that's not a stupid conversation. I mean, is he going to live it down? No, as friends, we kind of rib him about it. But at the same time,
weeks already.
Things are being learned, things are being gained. Oscar here himself, he's like, he'll be listening to shenanigans and he'll ask a question, whether it's important or not.
Hold over so that way you don't burn your finger when you pull it through.
There you go.
There you go.
Because I was burning my finger when I would do it. He's like,
yes,
just
that's
hold
what
over the envelope.
He was putting his thumb right down on there because he said it wasn't stiff enough to strike. And I was like, what do you mean?
Well, yeah, because if I just did this, it would
Right,
bend or
that's
break. And
why
he's
you
like,
fold
and
it
so
over
I would take my
pinch it.
thumb and I would press it to it, but it would burn my thumb. And he's like, just bolt. It's like you can do it without burning yourself. Like, no, you can't. You cannot. It's like, all right, take a matchstick,
Wrong.
pulls it off. Here's a matchstick. Now put it on the thing. All right. Now fold the envelope over. Fold the like this thing? Yeah. Get it to light first try. Huh. It's like you could think you're absolutely right. There's no way it'll do it. I can't talk now. There's no way it'll happen. You can always be proven wrong. So it's best to go in with the mindset of let's try it.
Yeah. Let's try it. Let's try
Let's
it.
see. If it turns out to still be wrong after, man.
We'll
But
address it from there. We will address it from there. And I think, you know, if it helps any, I haven't told Nitro yet.
it doesn't.
Jake's gonna find a way, Born, to put you in every single video.
Well, actually, interestingly enough, I won't out you fully, but for those who watch the videos regularly, they may possibly realize Bourne's voice sounds familiar.
a tad similar.
A tad familiar.
Really? In what way do you mean?
Like that right there.
I couldn't put where did I put the cap to this thing? There was a lid.
Also, don't let Bourne around the flame. He gets distracted easily, as we see.
Where the hell? I'll find it
Later, yeah.
later. I put it here.
Any other points anybody can think of that we need to make on this particular topic?
Fairies.
I think we've covered a good chunk of the like main bullet points that come along with listening.
I mean, yeah, because I don't know how to continue the conversation without just beating a dead horse.
And that's a fair point.
Yeah.
Oscar, you, because you bring some very unique insights from time to time. Now you look distracted.
like-
You're like Bourne. What's that over there?
No, I was just thinking of like kind of like questions and stuff. And I was just thinking kind of like you know that one question, like a really like new question is like, what are some entities that are good for blank? And I was just
Yeah.
like, what are some good entities that are good for listening? And I was just like, literally all of them. I would think.
Yeah,
Probably
most
some are better
of
than
these
others,
are pretty
but
good at wanting you to listen. Though, if you want specifics, I would actually recommend Odin.
I was
Odin
thinking
is a
Odin,
great
yeah.
one for teaching. I mean,
Oh.
look at the Havamal. Jade was right. The Havamal was amazing. In fact, did
Aha!
possibly roundtable?
I found it.
We didn't. I don't remember if we did that one.
We didn't do it. We're talking about doing it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
Odin would actually be a good one. Thoth is actually pretty good if you work with the Egyptian deities. He's really handy at that. I've actually found Hades is pretty good at listening and teaching one to listen and pay attention. I know he's not usually associated with knowledge and all, but he's pretty good there. In the Draconic Path, Zephyrzil, amazing for it. Amazing. I've also found Terrafana's really good at listening and teaching one to
I was gonna say
still
that
to
too.
listen.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's a lot of students I've had come back and it's like, yeah, she keeps telling me to sit still and pay attention and listen. And they admit once they actually slow down and they're there in that moment, then things just start clicking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So those are some entities that right off the bat I can think of. So if you all have any recommendations of entities you can think of or no, go ahead and toss them out, because that probably will be a question that will pop up.
Well, there is one more, but they're listed in the 102 Dragon Magic 102 course.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I can really list them here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, go ahead and mention them, because if a person's interested in working with them, they can work their way to Dragon Magic 102.
Well, it's
Give them credit.
and it's great that I forget the name just
Oh,
now.
well, I thought you knew the name. Never mind. I thought you had the information already.
Kantaka? It's the first
What,
one in the
Askantaka?
intersection. Yes, Askantaka.
Oh,
It's like they're like the first one, their first one in the air section.
that
Yes,
is a good point.
Askantaka is great at just communication in general.
One that I could throw out there, just, I mean, I've worked with this entity for quite a while already, but for those who like aren't in Dragon Magic, Lucifer is excellent at
Oh
helping with
yeah,
like communication and
that's a
knowledge.
good idea.
Yeah,
Suggestion.
that is a good one. That is one I forgot. Glad you see.
Talk to them. Well,
Lucifer's a good one. There we go.
Known as the light bringer, knowledge.
Indeed, indeed. And listening will obviously shed some light on some stuff for sure. So definitely up Lucifer's alley. Great.
I bet
All
you
right.
he could use the match the right way the first time.
Indeed, indeed.
And somewhat tangentially related to the main topic of this discussion so far.
That's fine. I mean, Squirrel usually took us down 20. So.
Yeah, it's heavily related, but it isn't the specific topic. Is when you're going in with a discussion, keeping everything that's been said before now in the video in mind.
Okay.
But also, if you are in an actual debate scenario.
Okay. That is a slightly different scenario, but I get you.
Right. In those moments where you're engaging in questions and answers with people, especially if it's back and forth, do try to keep in mind the reliability of source info.
That's actually a big one and a good one for the occult as well.
Yes. Like, is this my opinion? Is this personal gnosis? Is this something I've experienced? Is it something that I have corroborated evidence for? Is it something I found on TikTok? And that's all I have. You know, certain stuff you can take on faith, but try to add a grain of salt. Some stuff really should only be salt.
Not pecan pie. Go on board.
So but ultimately, just, I don't want to say go as far as vet your source info, as useful as that would be. I'm very much a trust but verify type of person. Like, I could have my girlfriend, my parents, or my best friend come through and they tell me information, and I could trust them with my life, but I'm going to verify what you just said. So it's just like, even if it's someone that you would really trust, always look into it, do your research, figure out if what is said is actually true. Because as an example of this, a couple people I speak with frequently came to me and said that a city near me had a new rule posted, a new law that basically said you cannot have roommates, period, in a rental structure.
That's a weird.
I'm like, it's weird. Yeah, it's like, I trust you think this. But let's look into that show. Would you be willing to, sit down and look through the paperwork? And we went and found the bill, went through it, and it turns out there was a limit placed on people who weren't related, and there was still a capped number in 1-2 bedroom apartments. You can't have 15 people in there.
It sounds like a fire safety matter more than
it does. It's a lot of those things. It just says you cannot have more than 5 people in a 1-bedroom apartment.
I don't like people well enough for that.
Right. And it's something simple like that, but someone on TikTok twisted it. It's like, oh, this place is saying you can't have roommates. everyone who rents has to be living alone. I'm like, that's not what that says.
No, you have a very, very, very valid point here. And this actually goes for everything. I mean, everyone on the admin team knows I have a hate relationship with Witch Talk. There's not even a light in there. I avoid it like the plague. But even with that aside, try to verify things when you can instead of just repeating and parroting. And this even goes for the occult. A lot of people shove it to the side in the occult because they're like, well, how do you verify it? Well, first off, if it's a personal gnosis, you need to state this is personal gnosis. This has worked for me. This has been what I've been doing. Yeah. If you're repeating something else, you would admit that. Like many of you know, the backbone of my channel. In fact, Jade, I think you and Born, this is really what hooked you guys to me, was the fact that I bring a perspective. I share my perspective. I share my experience with you all. And I encourage you not only to not take my word for it, but to apply it and actually see if you get those actual tangible results I keep talking about in the freaking intro.
Exactly.
Because I'll be honest with you, if you spend 2 years following my videos in my channel and you ain't manifested squat, why are you listening to me? I ain't that good looking.
Exactly. even before coming across any
there's better looking occultists, maybe they can help you.
Well, it's like even before coming across any of your videos, anything I would do was always based on results. I worked on it until I could get results and tried to improve it. If something wasn't improving well enough or did nothing at all, abandon it entirely and move on to something that did function. And so a lot of the results of someone that wants to parrot info or trust an unreliable source, it's like if something is opinion or if it's personal gnosis or just belief, that's fine. But just if you're going to take that into a discussion or, heavens forbid, an argument, state it as this is my opinion, gnosis, or whatever it is. Don't push it as objective fact. Because it ain't
kind of like the threefold law and other things in many traditions that we've seen.
There's a number of things that many will like to push, and some of them contradictory, even unto themselves, let alone with each other.
Yeah, this is what I do in my practice, so this is a fact. And that kind of
it's like
present it as everyone should do it the way I do it. It's kind of
and it is not in fact unless you can prove it empirically, which unfortunately with this is
the cult, you really can't.
Yeah, it's pretty much impossible. You can get it into working.
You're right.
You can get it into working theory. Like you can get 400 different practitioners, have them all do the same research, and if they come up together with similar results, then you have something as at least theory.
Yep.
But we can't really prove any of it.
Yeah.
And until someone magically conjures an apple, we're I
don't know if I'd trust the apple to eat it, I'll be honest with you.
But regardless of whether it's edible, just
person.
Making it appear.
But I agree with you. I think that would avoid a lot of arguments and even misunderstandings. If we were mindful of that. And I'm guilty of this too, because as a teacher and someone who is constantly answering questions over and over, I get into a rhythm to where I'm answering the question with the information that I have found and other magicians and colleagues that I have spoken with to, when you crunch the numbers, to be the most effective answer for this question, which I've explained on the channel a few times. But in my phrasing, it often comes up like this is the right answer.
Yeah.
And that's not happens. My intent. Which in the gilded community, we have a lot of great people who they're like, well, Drake, what about? And they will follow up with my statement. And it's like, no, that'll actually work too. And it's understanding, luckily the bulk of our gilded community understands Drake is not perfect. He's a freaking idiot and he has to answer a lot of questions.
And of that last bit, I've been guilty of that myself,
So
for sure.
we're not always perfect at how we phrase it, but we should try to be mindful of it. And especially if you feel the conversation's getting heated, go back, look at it, think what was said, what was typed. Are you coming across authoritatively or something? Can help. Be willing to see the other person. Honestly, I find that if you're willing to just actively, genuinely listen to the other person and try to see their point of view instead of just argue yours, usually those flames don't get fanned. Usually. Sometimes somebody's just itching for a fight. It happens. In that case, don't bite. Don't bite. Just let them burn themselves out and just wander off. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Oscar, any closing thoughts?
Not that I can think of. I think we've covered a lot of. I think we covered all the topics I feel like are important in listening and communicating.
Cool. Well, we actually was joking that this would be our shortest roundtable. It was not, guys.
Oh,
We crossed our hour. I'm not going to lie. However, I think we did a great job covering this. Born, Oscar, I am glad you all decided to join us. And if we, or when we do more roundtables, because we will, hopefully you would consider joining us perhaps for the Volspa reading, where it was going to do a similar roundtable for the Volspa like we did the Havamo. I don't know if any of you are.
I have to read.
Yeah, actually, you'll be reading online
Mm-hmm.
because we take turns reading the different stanzas in there.
See, I have a weird thing when it comes to reading, because when it comes,
they're broken up shortly, and then we discuss what's being said.
true enough, but even like when it comes when the information travels from eyes to brain, perfectly fine. If it's running at the same time as the program from brain to mouth, it just trips up. There's bugs in the system, because it's like my
entertainment value here on YouTube.
My eyes read "the boy walked to the bus stop," and my mouth speaks "the boy."
I do the same thing, mate. I'm dyslexic as can be. Go back and watch the Havamal series. You will see me just like I've literally finished a whole stanza. It flowed perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm like, that ain't right, and I had to go back.
Yeah, done that.
That ain't right.
It's like read it word for word, but then the tone wasn't right. It's like, did I just phrase that like a question? Like what?
In fact, that's one of the things I like. I don't like perfection. I like humanity. So bring it on in. And Oscar, same thing to you. You
too much of a perfectionist.
You're invited back. Who knows? Maybe it'll be the four of us, and Lord help us, maybe we'll even get Squirrel into the mix.
Definitely would love to see your guys' perspective on the Volspa.
Yeah. All right. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you again for your time and setting aside the time, the space, and those who are in the apartment with you, telling them you're going to be on the YouTube, stay out of the way, please. I know it can be a thing to make sure everyone knows to give the space. So thank you for your time, guys. I appreciate it. And well, everyone, hope you enjoyed the roundtable and the shenanigans and the rabbit trails. And we will see you all next time. Good night.
Indeed.
Bye.
Bye.